Hi, my name is Tom. Welcome to my channel, Integral Views. So this video is for young men, but actually it really applies to all men. So men have been demonized systematically, called toxic, basically continuously for pretty much an entire generation. They're seemingly blamed for all of society's problems. And also, they've had all the kind of positive male role models within movie franchises and series, etc., removed. And also, they're told that basically any positive outcomes from masculinity is the result of oppression. That's current positive results, and then also historically, it's all just because men were oppressive. So also, they're discriminated against systematically, objectively, in hiring practices and in many other ways. And as a cherry on top, this is all while they're told that they're privileged. So any representation of positive masculinity is seemingly unacceptable in today's society. And all of masculinity is boiled down into its most harmful forms, such that then all masculinity is seen as harmful and toxic. So men, in particular young men, have been forced to kind of, sit by whilst their society and the culture that they live within has been eroded right the way down to its foundations in so many different ways. And also they're told that they live in a patriarchy when the observable reality around them tells them that the opposite is true. And also there is this focus on equality of outcome and sort of distribution of resources, as opposed to fair competition and striving for excellence, which are more kind of masculine traits. So also, open borders, gender ideology, critical race theory, all of these things represent an erosion of masculinity in society and culturally. And that's all associated with no longer enforcing healthy boundaries across society. And whilst telling men that they are toxic, the state has basically set the expectation that it will step into these traditionally male roles, right? So protecting the family and, protecting everybody from external harms. And what have we seen? Well, for one thing, we see a large amount of young men from around the world, largely from Africa and the Middle East, coming into the UK as and when they want, seemingly, right? And then committing sexual offences against British women at extremely high rates. And we're also seeing women drop out of the workforce en masse, effectively, at young ages. And that's shown in this chart here. So you can see, we hear a lot about the increases in disability, right? And a lot of that is young women in the age range of 25 to 34 dropping out of the workforce for mental health issues, anxiety and depression. So clearly this whole setup isn't working for them either. So all of this is a complete and utter failure of state. And this is basically because of a failed ideology that despises all forms of masculinity and will not have it at all, right? And this creates this imbalance in society between femininity and feminine traits and masculine traits. So they're out of balance. When they're in balance, all good. When they're out of balance, not so good. Now in this next bit, I'm going to speak in very generalized terms, okay? And I know that. But this is basically just generalized traits between men and women. So women and what we classify or could classify as femininity, it kind of emphasizes empathy to a large extent, right? So operates on the basis of kind of unconditional care. And of course, with the maternal instinct, that's very, very important, right? Because it's like unconditional care, doesn't discriminate, and yeah, very important. Now, and thank God for that, because we all depend on it. Every single human being that's ever existed depends on that, don't we? So an incredibly important thing, right? Highly valuable. So it's very caring, right? It's nurturing, loving, emotionally attuned, very much attuned to suffering and then caring and trying to remove that. So it values equality of distribution, largely. I'm speaking in generalized terms. Equality of distribution of resources without discrimination. Okay. Now let's get on to the masculine traits that we can determine. Generalized, okay. So provides like a strict rules-based order, right? And standards of behavior based on fairness and meritocracy. Discriminates against threats, so it's much more discriminating. And then it's ready to act ruthlessly to protect the family or the tribe. Generally is protective. But it's willing to discriminate, to discern, and then take action against threats as and when they arise. It's willing to sacrifice for the greater good, a sense of duty and honour. Those things are very important. Strong and unflinching, and sometimes that means being unemotional. Sometimes the greater good requires that in that moment. Yeah, it values excellence, as I've said before, competition and accountability and responsibility. These kinds of traits. And it also thrives on a deep sense of purpose. So a deep sense of purpose is like an underwriting thread, and you have to ask yourself, what's the deep purpose that men see in this society right now? Is the purpose that we basically see an erosion of it, of our culture, when we see women suffering? And what exactly is the purpose of what we're doing here? And just to reiterate, yeah, these were generalizations and I'm aware of that. So of course, you can't say that those female characteristics only apply to women, because men can be caring and are caring as well. And then women can be strong and are strong very much often as well. So, and discerning. So effectively what we're doing is pushing it out to the extremes just so we can get an understanding of, the context for this conversation. So one of those masculine traits is the setting of boundaries, right? The hard line of saying this far and no further. No, this is a strict boundary, okay? And we've pushed those boundaries in society and in culture so far now into a really insane degree, where now we've even kind of removed boundaries between binaries, between sex binaries, and in many other ways. And also open borders, yeah? So borders are another form of boundary that has been eroded, and that is completely insane as well. And just quickly, if you want to delve into a good book on that topic, on the gender theory topic, I recommend the book Irreversible Damage. So check that one out if you're interested. And why has this happened? Well, since the World Wars, we have had like a series of weak men in positions of leadership, right? Living this luxury lifestyle off the back of sacrifices of stronger men in generations past. And they facilitated the demonization of men because they felt a sense of shame and guilt internally. I think that they basically knew that they weren't worthy of the life that they were living. And they had a kind of self-hatred for this privilege that they saw that they had, right? But instead of, exercising that on themselves, so instead of putting themselves in a position of having to pay for that, instead they basically projected that onto younger generations of men by demonizing them and then by basically eroding masculinity overall across the culture. So it's a form of self-flagellation, right? Committed largely by older generations and projected down onto younger generations of men who've never been in a position of privilege that they enjoyed in their younger years. Now, this isn't saying across all men of older generations whatsoever. It's just a certain subset, many of which ended up in leadership positions. And maybe it's no coincidence that it's often the men in leadership positions that are weak men, right, who do this self-flagellation projected onto younger generations. Maybe it's because those people in those positions of power are more likely to have this luxury lifestyle that they then feel a sense of guilt about, right? Context for everything is hugely important, yeah? So let's start building some. Single mother households have quadrupled since the 1970s. Quadrupled single mother households. So many young men have no direct positive male role models, right? And to take this even further, 92% of teachers and teaching assistants combined in primary and secondary schools in the UK, 92% are women. And in those very same schools, those boys will often be lectured to in assemblies of the new thing that these amazing, moralizing, virtue signaling weak men want to come and sort of show to them, which is around toxic masculinity. We saw this with Adolescence, this Netflix series that went all around schools with these boys. What they're basically doing is sitting there in the school hall being told men are toxic. So is it any wonder then in this context that many young men and boys have retreated into video games, into corn, you know what I mean, and short form content online, retreating from society? But this is my message to them, right? You have been systematically failed, okay? You've been systematically failed in every sense, essentially. You've been demonized wrongfully, okay? You've been kind of held to account for the sins of your father. That's what I think. But you are desperately needed by society. You are incredibly important. Because this is the last chance saloon. Not only are the barbarians at the gate, they are inside the compound, running amok, okay? Society needs you. So after demonizing you, discriminating against you, overtly, okay, for basically your whole lives, many of you, okay, now society needs you. Now society has to turn to you, because it is you that can make the difference, okay? Those older generations, they're not going to be making that difference. It's down to you to build the society for the future. And many right-thinking women are just waiting for the men to stand up, for the young men in particular, to stand up and take action. And the UK government has realised we've got a very serious problem with male suicide absolutely skyrocketing and male mental health in the toilet, and men just basically removing themselves from society effectively, yeah? So, oh no, we've got a problem now. I wonder why, yeah? So what is it that they think is the solution now, yeah? So they've come up with this whole plan. And among other things, a lot of what they basically talk about, and you see these incredibly cringe videos on X from male politicians now who are emoting and virtue signalling, yeah? And what they're basically doing and saying is that men need to express their emotions more. So basically, in other words, their solution is for men to be more like women, for men to express their emotions and act more like women. So then so the problem is that they're men and not women. Okay, maybe this has got something to do with the fact that 80% of clinical psychologists in the UK right now are women. All good, right? So it's one thing to notice the problem, but what do we actually do about it? Okay, well, first of all, no civil unrest. Okay, so as soon as you start doing things like that, you just validate this incorrect view of masculinity. So that is not the right approach. I don't support it whatsoever. No civil unrest. Everything's controlled, okay? Now, before we get into what do we do about this, what can you practically do? And I'm going to go through what you can practically do from my perspective, okay? And it will work, and it is evidence-based. But first, let's have a look at some context, yeah? So obesity. Obesity has absolutely skyrocketed since the 1960s. It's gone from around 13% of the population being obese to more than 45%. This is US data, but it's the same in the UK, okay? And this has a massive impact because obesity causes testosterone to drop, right? So the way that this works is that adipose tissue, which is belly, visceral fat, etc., acts like basically a hormone factory, okay? It makes aromatase, and that's an enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. So that fat is literally lowering testosterone and feminizing men. And we see that at very, very high rates now relative to the 70s. And then alongside that, we see dramatic drops in testosterone. So what this chart shows is that alongside, perfectly aligned with that chart of obesity rising, you've got testosterone dropping. So it's going from 100%, it's gone down to below 60%. It's a 40% drop in testosterone in men since the 1970s in one single generation. And this is an existential problem, because we're seeing the same drop in sperm counts. So this shows here that we've seen a 60% drop or more in sperm counts since the 1970s. That is existential. That continues, it's game over. It doesn't matter what else is happening in society, right? Now, if you really want to black pill yourself on this issue, and I really recommend this book. It's one of my, it's such an informative book, and it explains so much about what's happening in society. Go read the book Countdown, okay? And then you can also read the book Estrogeneration. That's another good one. But this is existential in many other ways, right? Because we're seeing female fertility rates drop as well, yeah? So in this chart, I'm showing different kinds of fertility rates in the UK. For foreign-born, non-UK born women, shown in blue, you can see the fertility rates dropped, but it's still around 2, yeah? 2 per woman. So around replacement levels. But then if you look at UK born women, it's down at below 1.4. What that means is, in one single generation, there's 33% less people. In 2 generations, it's 56% less people overall. And in 3 generations, that's a 70% drop in the population. Now, I have experienced quite a large amount of this kind of bias and discrimination as a man in my life, but I really feel so strongly, and sort of, I have so much sympathy for young men in particular in the world in which we've created for them. So, you know, I want to help in any way I can based on my experience, okay? So I've got some things that I want to outline as my take on the best thing to do. So number 1, we've seen that obesity drops testosterone. That impacts mental health, well-being, drive, all these kinds of things. So get fit, okay? But that doesn't mean running endlessly, jogging, doing endless cardio, cutting your calories, and the nonsense that the government comes out with. It means lifting heavy weights. Lifting heavy weights, you doing compound exercises. You don't have to go extreme and become some kind of, you know, gym nut. The thing is that basically small doses, yeah, have a big impact. Heavy compound lifts, squats, bench press, rows, pull-ups, deadlifts. That's basically it. Twice a week, 30 minutes max. Small dose, yeah. And that small dose has a massive impact on your circulatory system, your respiratory system, your basically everything, the way you sleep, your hormones, everything is just, it's a life hack, okay? And just quickly, I've had my hormones tested. I do these blood tests. They're only like £30 in the UK. And I do them every few months. And, you know, I've tracked dramatic increase in my testosterone levels since I have been lifting heavy weights. Number 2, gain control over the mind. So I recommend meditation, Zen meditation. So this is a real challenge, and I've done a video on it. If you want a quick hit, you know, in short sort of basic terms, you can go and check that out. But, you know, in addition to this, gaining control of the mind, because everything stems from the mind, right? So read up on psychology, right? So Carl Jung, for example, and then just observe your behavior and try to improve in many ways in your life, okay? Also, read philosophy, read the great thinkers from the past. Highly recommended. Number 3, get educated. I provide as much information as I can. I'm going to continue to do that on my channel. But basically, get educated and then get active. So go and, for example, learn everything you can possibly about the situation that's happening in the country, but also in your local area. Find out who your local MP is and councillors, and then go to their little sessions that they host in your area. And then go equipped with more information than they have, and hold them to account in a calm way, right? Calmly, but very informed and focused with intent and confidence. Because often these leaders, they never actually get challenged. And it's not typically the kind of young men and the men who'll go and do this. So I think that, you know, that is a really powerful thing to do. Number 4, don't tolerate nonsense. So unfortunately, in the workplace and in conversations with family and friends, we'll often hear nonsense said, yeah? And we'll just basically have to not say anything, shut up. I've been there myself. I've been in corporate environments where I've had to just bite my lip and not say anything for months. That was my daily reality, okay? These groups that I wasn't invited to, groups that everybody else but not me, being overlooked for promotions, yeah? Basically all of this nonsense. And then I've heard those opinions expressed by friends, by family, by just people in general. And what I'm saying is, don't tolerate it. basically speak up, speak your mind with confidence, equip yourself with knowledge, and then challenge people and say, no, you're wrong and this is why. Not in an aggressive way, but in a confident way. Number 5, get corn completely out of your life. So 9.4% of 18 to 24-year-old women in the UK are OnlyFans creators. I ran the maths on this and couldn't quite believe it. This is the best possible information I could get, and that's what I came up with. 9.4%. So nearly 1 in 10 18 to 24-year-olds females are OnlyFans creators in the UK. That is insanely and unacceptably high. It is shameful. Right, this entire industry needs to die. So basically what I'm saying is leave the whole industry to die. It only exists, right, when it's engaged in. So have higher standards, ignore it and just bow out. Number 6, protect your hormones and your health. Use mineral sunscreen because chemical sunscreen is an androgen disruptor. Okay, filter your drinking water, preferably with reverse osmosis. Get seed oils completely out of your diet. Get rid of those, seriously. Replace with olive oil. Eat a moderately high protein diet. Supplement with omega-3s, with vitamin D, with creatine, with a multivitamin. Stop drinking alcohol if you can at all do it, or at least limit it as much as you possibly can. It's bad stuff. Do not cut calories too low. Build muscle and let the muscle burn the fat. This is the ultimate purpose because society is in trouble, yeah? Culturally, we are in trouble. So we need good men. We need as many good men as possible. So with that purpose comes self-respect and comes the positive mental health, yeah? Comes the changes to hormones through exercise. That's where you get positive mental health from. Avoid the victim mentality like the plague, despite the fact that you have a right to feel victimized because you have been. Avoid the victim mentality like the plague. It is toxic. It corrodes everything. As I said before, the stakes could not be higher. This is existential, yeah? And I know the feeling, well, you've been basically demonized for years and now everyone turns to you to have to deal with it. But this is the harsh truth. It's that or nothing. Yeah, that's what I think. So if young men think that they don't have a purpose, well, they very much have a purpose. They are very much needed. They are critically important, especially now. I just wanted to provide this sort of casual example of misandry that was expressed in media in the UK. This is from the Chancellor recently, talking about being mansplained, despite the fact that she's doing an absolutely objectively terrible job with the economy. And we see this all the time, don't we? Toxic masculinity, mansplaining, manspreading, all of this stuff, just constant erosion. And, you know, it shouldn't be tolerated. But of course, the truth is that some men do cause harm in society, from domestic violence to different kinds of crime, etc. Yeah, but that's a small percentage of men actually, okay? And so now we've just condensed all masculinity to apparently just being that, right? But it takes good men to protect against and fight against and set standards to prevent that kind of thing from happening. It takes good men to confront it and to be unyielding, right? To not tolerate that kind of behavior. And you know that saying, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Well, that's very much at play, but the good times are over. Now, none of this is a demonization of femininity, of women whatsoever, okay? Because as I've said throughout this video, it's about balance. The point I'm making is we are out of balance, clearly. And I think, you know, just as we've been out of balance in the past, you know, in favor of masculinity in a sense, yeah, through many wars and through centuries, now the pendulum has swung, and it's swung way past the balancing point. But the answer is not misogyny. The answer is not blaming women, okay? Because just blaming another group, just blaming the other group never works. So let's do better. We need to have full respect and admiration for women. Not always, of course, there are harmful forms of femininity as well, just as there are masculinity. Again, it's about balance. But it's not right to just basically blame all femininity, because actually we all depend on it. My final message for young men in particular is, look, I feel so much sympathy for you. I can see what's happened. I know it enough. I've experienced it enough in my life, but I can't say that I've experienced it like you have, yeah? But I can understand, because I've felt it, yeah? I just feel like you've had it worse. And I think that effectively I get your anger. I get what's happening. I get why you want to just, kind of go into reclusive mode and just enter into a virtual world and get away from all of this horrible nonsense that society does, because it's not working. I get it completely. But the thing is, you're so valuable. You're so valuable for society. Society depends on you 100%. And I think that, you have a very seriously important purpose in this society and overall, especially now. The harsh truth is that we have a cultural crisis that's occurring, whether people like to admit it or not. And it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to require a huge amount of work from people in a concerted way and consistently, politically, socially. And I think really one of the important things is, when you hear views being expressed that are not true, call people out on it, not in an aggressive, nasty way, but just say, no, that's not correct. We need to be comfortable saying no again. We have to say no a lot more often. No, you can't come into the country. No, you're a boy and you're a girl. That's it. So we need to be much more comfortable doing this. Okay, I'll leave it there. If you watched all the way through, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you found that useful, valuable, informative, give the video a like, maybe subscribe to my channel if you want to. A lot more to come in future. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.